Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery. Today I have Erica here. As you've seen her videos on really good videos on friends and family. Before we go any further, if you could please subscribe down below. This is a very unique video. This is an idea I had with Rob about a month ago and it kind of just left my mind, and Erica was the one that brought it back up, and I said we definitely have to make this video. So what we're going to do is I have 3 questions for Erica. She has 3 questions for me, all relating to the journey, OCD, stuff like that.
We don't know what they are.
We don't know what the questions are. And I'm gonna go first. Remember Milo's crying, and then we got Daisy over here, of course. You know, or she'll bark. So the first question I have for you is, what has been the #1 thing you've learned on my journey on your end?
The #1 thing that I've learned on your journey?
Or in both of our journeys, and you've taken away.
I mean, I think I've spoken about this in an old video, that I can tolerate a lot more deal with a lot more than I ever thought that I could. So there's that. I mean, I don't think anything about this process has been easy, and when you go through things like that, you kind of show yourself. I mean, you talk about low frustration tolerance sometimes in videos and stuff, and I think for everybody involved, it kind of helps develop that low frustration tolerance.
Yeah, I can agree with that, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, go through OCD recovery journey, whether you're a family or friend or a sufferer, and you're gonna build some frustration tolerance. No matter who you are, it's bound to happen the further you get along in the journey. So, okay.
My first question? Okay. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice at the beginning of this journey, what would that advice have been?
That's a really good one. That the more we want it gone right now, and Rob did a post on it right today, he put like 6 different things, like, I just want depersonalization gone, I just want derealization gone, I just want anxiety gone, I just want this gone, I want OCD gone. The more you want to rid yourself of those feelings, the longer you more than likely are going to stay stuck, because that's the opposite of unconditional self-life and other acceptance, which is the major philosophy we use for going towards OCD recovery. So I think that is probably the #1 thing I would go back and tell myself, is to the importance of patience and balance, because I think all of us have gone through this where we think we're just going to like get to this point, and like one day, all OCD sufferers think this. One day we think we're going to wake up and hit a recovery line, like we're going to hit a finish line, and OCD recovery is just going to be there. And unfortunately,
like there's going to be a day on the
there's like a
calendar.
day, exactly. This is why deadlines don't work. This is why, you know, other aspects like this just don't work. It's because OCD recovery is not a linear journey, which means straight. It's not even like this. It's all over the place. And that's what really keeps a lot of people stuck in the long run. It's just that, you know, patience and balance. OCD sufferers are not very good with patience, and understandably so, because we'll be chronically suffering. Anyone that had OCD chronically would probably act the same way, more than likely. And then balance. The more we have a lot of unbalanced habits in our life, the harder it is to probably reach a state of recovery. I do believe that, and maintain it, because Kirsty talks about that a lot. Over here. Oh my gosh. So, okay. My second question for you. This is a good one. You talked about this. You had a video on this, but I just want to reiterate it again, just in case someone has not seen this video. How did you get through your or mine darkest moments, the whole thing?
Well, realistically, I cried a lot, but there were lots of tears and lots of frustration. But getting through the darker moments, I mean, I don't know that there's any one way that I would say that I did it. I do recall, you know, having to remind myself to take care of myself and put myself first every once in a while, because Nick was not wanting to live anymore, and when that happens, a lot of the time you forget about yourself. So I do think that was super, super helpful. I don't know that I could point to any one specific piece of advice that I would say this is what got me through it. But crying was definitely one of them.
So real quick, so like how did you help me get through my darkest moments? How did you do that? What did you have to do? What did you have to change about your approach?
I had to practice tough love a lot of the time. I don't know if that was the video that you're referring to, but I did have to practice tough love a lot of the time. And I mean, you know, when somebody's feeling really, really deep into emotions, especially with things like OCD, a lot of the time what you want to do is coddle them and reassure them and do these what feels like a very loving thing, but sometimes the very loving thing is not actually what they need. And that was the case in Nick's case a lot of the time. He needed to hear the hard things, and that wasn't easy for me because I like to be the the loving and coddling and reassurancy type of person. And that's probably something else that I've learned, is that, you know, that's not always what's needed.
Yeah,
and
no.
when it's appropriate to do that and when it's not.
I definitely think, yeah, because you don't want to be tough love all the time, because you could make that argument with rational emotive behavioral thinking, and then it's a little too much, you know, because then it becomes unbalanced in its way of itself. You know, thinking that falling into the trap that everything needs to be rational, everything in life needs to be rational. Trust me, I have fallen into that trap, and we all probably do that. But I think it's a really good point. I think the biggest thing that probably holds people back from, probably the biggest thing that holds sufferers back with, like, regarding family members, even though family members, as we know, don't bring us to recovery, but they definitely can aid in the support system. We would prefer them to be there, but we don't need them to understand, which is fine. It's just the lack of information out there for family and friends. So stuff like this is really, really important, because there's not a lot of really good videos covering those things, which is unfortunate. Okay, what's your second?
Okay, it's a two-part question.
Oh.
What was the most and least helpful thing that I did for you?
Okay, the most helpful thing would probably play off of what we were talking about with you. Is it easier for you to scratch Daisy?
I can scratch
There we
her.
go. Well, my arm is like twisted backwards, and if we don't scratch her, she starts growling, because she's the brat of brats. So
Most and least helpful.
yeah. So I would say the most helpful thing Erica did for me was get me out of bed in the morning, which was probably very weird for her because I'm a morning person, pretty much. I've gotten better balance. Like, it was actually part of, you know, my irrational beliefs. Like, you know, I need to get up at 5 a.m, 7 days a week. Like, I need to get up. And I was very, very hard on myself when OCD was building. So Erica helped me get out of bed, which was really big. She helped me stay on top of my disputing when it was more needed in a more formal format, where I actually had a notebook. Now, so I just more so dispute on the fly if I need to, because that's what you do when you're further along in recovery. You don't need a notebook or set times or exposures, because you know OCD very well. So I'm not like, oh, I need to sit down 20 minutes a day and dispute, but, you know, most people will probably reach that point if they work in recovery. I would say the least helpful thing you did, I don't know, that's a hard one. I don't, the least helpful thing you did. At the time, this is a good one. Okay, I don't really know what the least helpful thing. At the time, I thought it was you putting me in the mental hospital, but it ended up being the best thing Erica ever did. So that is an experience. I know a lot of people are scared of going to the mental hospital. Moment sent me a private video talking about how I've helped him change his stigma on mental hospital, like what people are like, you know, because we have a belief. People go to a mental hospital, they're like these like dungeon creatures that like people are like, you know what I mean?
Stay away.
Like, stay away, you know? It's just not like that. It's just not. A lot of the people that were in there with me who were Baker acted were very similar to me. There was definitely people who I told you, like split personality, severe schizophrenia, manic disorders. I saw people when I was in there, a lot of psychosis. It was just a really big eye-opener to realize. At the time, I didn't realize this. You know, Steve Jobs in his commencement speech from Stanford, it's probably my favorite commencement speech, but he says it's impossible to connect the dots going forward. You can only connect the dots going backwards, because you could see how they led up. But, you know, at the time, I'm like, God, this is making me worse. I'd scream at her on the phone, like, oh my gosh, you know, get my one phone call a day on the phone, like you see in jail movies. Like, yeah, Mr. Pinello, you go get your 5 minutes on the phone. It was in the rec. It was in the,
screaming at me that
he was in the rec lobby too. I was in the lobby, so everyone else that was in the lobby, like coloring or playing checkers, got to listen to you on the phone. So it was an interesting scenario. But looking backwards, it was one of the best scenarios I could have had, because it really opened my eyes to, you know, even though when you're chronically suffering, you could still do a lot of things. You might not do it well. You know, I always talk about, this is something I don't really talk about. I know we'll get on to the third point for you, but I think is important. When I would be hiking, really suffering, how do I want to say this? Because this is important. getting yourself to like be active or go to the gym or like draw or like take part in activities or read the reading list,
Things that you enjoy.
that helps build your low frustration tolerance in a way that like can't be overlooked. For myself, unfortunately, I have big mountains right here. Climbing the mountains and doing the Manitou staircase I do, the 3,000 steps up a mountain, which is insane. I did it this morning. That, when you're doing that, suffering, in the moment you don't realize it, but when you get better, you say to yourself, wow, that really, like if I could do that, I could do a lot of things, you know? So that was a huge thing. But yeah, going to the mental hospital at the time was probably like the thing I thought that, oh my gosh, why would she do this to me? And I'm blaming everything on the outside world. When in reality, like, I just happened to be at that point in time. It got me there. So that's a hard one because I don't think there's anything you really did that
Wasn't sure if you would say like you were too reassurancy and
you
too,
weren't though. You learned really quick.
or like you enabled or
Yeah,
something.
no,
like
you're
that.
not. You are not. You do not do that. Yeah, she hid my coffee.
I did actually. I hid your coffee. I hid your keys.
Yeah, hid my coffee, hid my keys, hid everything. Okay, so the last question for you is, and we kind of touched about this, but think about like the number one piece of advice. What's the number one piece of advice you would give to a family member? Like the number one piece of advice, what you thought would be the most important for someone.
Be open to hearing that what you're doing is not helpful.
That's a good one.
It takes a lot of humility and putting your ego aside, because a lot of the time we think we know what's right. I mean, that's just kind of human nature, it seems, in general. We think that we know what's right for us, for others, and it takes a lot of humility to hear that what you're doing might not be what's best for the person. So I would say that, because it's a learning process for the family and friends of people who are suffering as well. And we don't always know the right answer, and that's okay that you don't know the right answer, but you have to recognize that it's okay to not know the right answer.
I have a second part to that. What advice would you give to a family member or sufferer's loved one or a friend when the sufferer is in a high state of panic? Like really having either a really bad relapse or like when I would get like super manically crazy.
I wasn't always good at this, but not going along on the roller coaster ride with them.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because the more that you go along on that roller coaster ride with them, the more it's going to feed whatever it is that they're getting really panicked about. I noticed actually, and this wasn't necessarily OCD related, with the last fight that we had, we got pretty heated, and at one point I was losing my cool, and I like dropped my voice level down and started talking really calm, and you mirrored that, and I don't even think that you realized it, but things started to like slowly calm down when I started turning down the dial a little bit.
Was this a business fight?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it was. But because I was going on that roller coaster ride. Again, this is a learning experience. I'm not going to be good at it all the time.
Yeah.
But once I kind of realized, like, okay, this is not being productive, and neither of us wants to just stop having this conversation, but we need to calm it down a little bit. I calmed it down, and you mirrored that, and it was, yeah, so not going along on the roller coaster.
On the roller coaster was definitely a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my last question for you. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned in this whole process? So, same question that you asked me.
I love it. I knew that was going to be, when I was writing these questions, I said, the last question for me is going to be, what's the number one thing you've learned with advice or like learned? It always ends like that. I would say the number one thing I've learned about the journey is that humans are crazy. No.
Try again. Wrong answer.
Answer not accepted. I would say that the number one thing I learned on this journey, I mean, I'll say a couple things. Like the typical one that Rob always talks about, you can handle more than you think. Erica got to watch me freak out in the kitchen for the last 4 days about the CrossFit games and physically handling more than you think. Auschwitz.
I mean, tell them the eggs. What happened with the eggs?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to give you an example. I made a post in the Facebook the other day talking about my low frustration tolerance and how I've built it up over the last 2 years. I dropped an egg in the kitchen.
You dropped
once.
a carton of eggs.
I dropped a
in the
carton
kitchen
of
after we
eggs.
got
I
home.
think it ruined my life for like 36 hours. Like I was
He freaked out.
screaming, like, "You've got to be kidding me!"
I mean, you were already having not a great
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was when I had tinnitus.
Yeah.
I didn't even have somatic OCD.
No, that
yet.
was here. You had OCD. That was here in this house.
Oh. See, you don't even know what's going on. I don't even know what's going on.
But yeah, he dropped a carton of eggs and absolutely freaked out about the fact that he dropped eggs. I'm like, they're
You can
$1.50 at the store.
Yeah, no. I would say the second thing I would say is you can change your beliefs. A lot of people out there tell people that your beliefs are fixed and that you can't change them. That is not true. I am living proof of that. You can definitely change your beliefs. It just takes time and practice. So that's one. You can definitely change your belief. There is no such thing. I'm going to talk about three things. There's no such thing as treatment-resistant OCD, more than likely. Some people like myself or Oliver, it takes a long time to get underneath your fears. I know Jay talked about it. It took her a couple years. Hannah's taken her a couple years. Some people get better in 5 months and they're good. But if you have chronic OCD, when you have chronic OCD the way I have it or had it really bad, your whole life was OCD leading up to this. You didn't go from like someone with no compulsive behaviors and no bad habits to just chronic OCD. That is not one.
You definitely had OCD behaviors. I wouldn't say there was the anxiety piece to it, but I mean, when I first met him, I walked into his apartment and he had this bookshelf. We were just starting school. He had this bookshelf and he had whatever class names, like he had taken a piece of paper and written the class name, and that was the one spot on the shelf that was good.
Certainty. Yeah, I was.
And it was every shelf.
But
had
we have
this.
to talk about that because that's not always.
I'm not
indicative.
saying it's OCD.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah.
I'm not
We have
saying
to talk.
It's OCD, but
For me, it was because it was looking for certainty. Yeah. Organization is not OCD. I know you didn't mean that. She does not mean that. But for me, it was definitely looking for certainty. I showed a video yesterday in the basement. I showed all my notes. So there's probably no such thing as treatment-resistant OCD. You can definitely change your beliefs. Daisy's a brat. Number 3.
So what you learned.
Overall, the number one thing I learned about from this journey so far is, for me, the power of patience. The power of patience is gigantic. When you have little patience, you have low frustration tolerance. And you have low frustration tolerance when you have relapse or backdoor spikes, you're going to really dive into it and start analyzing. The more you learn about OCD and the better your concentration gets on working on patience and just feeling discomfort. I always say this, the majority of your OCD journey is not what you think it is. You think it's exposures, you think it's disputing beliefs. It's not. It's wearing anxiety like an uncomfortable coat 99% of the day. That's what it is. And then working on your disputing and exposures how you see fit. If you're constantly going out there being like, I need 200 exposures a day, you're going to be on the hamster wheel looking for relief. If you're disputing in your head 5 hours a day, which I've done a lot, because you see it works, once it starts to implement, you're like, oh yeah, boom, this works. Let's go at it full speed, full tilt. And then Rob's like, yeah, what are you doing? And then he's like, you're done. So, he's told me I'm done a lot, but he's a great guy. But yeah, that's probably the main thing I've learned. And I got a minute left because we want to turn it off at 20. If I don't turn it off at 20, I have to say moment 2 things. So the last thing is the importance of being outside in nature. She knows I love nature. Nature is really neat. It's really neat. And it was a great place for me to practice mindfulness. I don't put a lot of emphasis on mindfulness. We know that with somatic OCD cannot be the most beneficial. You can watch my videos on why it's probably not the most beneficial. And then I think being outside in nature was really important. And getting outside your comfort zone, like anything in life, in order to grow. So that's that. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna bring this in. Let's look at, oh, now she moves. Where you going? Hey. Great. So thank you for watching and have a great day. Where's the camera?